We attempted that, remember, through a legislation. But banks promised us, Mr. Speaker, banks promised us that if we remove the rate caps, they would loan even more to the private sector. Presently, that is not the case. In fact, bank executives sometimes can just sit and take teas and do nothing, but still make money for shareholders by buying government bonds and government bills. We must move away from that. Actually, we have crowded out private sector. You can see the youth is up in arms. They have no jobs because the private sector is not borrowing money from the
not lending.
The private sector is not borrowing money
from banks, yes.
To invest. There must be a net-off effect so that we also grow our economy. Thank you. Finally, there was the issue of what do we do about the poor and the pending bills. Pending bills is a serious matter, Mr. Speaker. I think it is something that we must agree on. I know we are moving as a country to accrual basis. As an accountant, I know with the accrual basis of accounting, then we will not be talking about pending bills because there will be no cutoff. Any bill that comes will automatically move to the next financial year and pay it. But these pending bills, a lot of them are also fictitious. I know there is a committee in place, and I don't want to criticize that committee. I know it is headed by the former Auditor General, Edward Ouko. But, Mr. Speaker, I ask myself this question. The pending bills that I'm told have been submitted to that committee, or before that committee, is upwards of 663 billion claims. And there are a total of 114,000 plus of those claims. How do you have one auditor, even if you are a genius, with a few months to audit that and give you? So what I'm saying in a nutshell, Mr. Speaker, is that we need to have a system where there is nothing like pending bills verification, because it has become a way of just failing to pay bills that are owed. We must have a system.
Not only that, nominee, you remember about 8 years ago, there was a committee to verify pending bills. It became a toll station. And all the committee was doing is go to a town like Eldoret, pitch in a hotel, and people with so-called pending bills turn up with briefcases and have their pending bills approved.
Exactly.
You remember?
Yes.
Yes.
And
what are you going to do differently?
It may happen again and again. What my proposal would be is that we may have to have a system, and it can even be through a legislation, where a legislation we have in the PFM Act that pending bills form first charge. But we should criminalize failure to pay pending bills. But above all, as CS Finance, which does not even require any policy or any legislative intervention, I will make sure that we have a system in place which locks anyone who attempts to pay a new bill and ignoring an old one. The system can lock you out, so that first in, first out. If a bill is supposed to be payable, let it be paid. This idea, I remember I've been an accountant at the University of Nairobi, and during our time, Mr. Speaker, what used to happen is you'd prepare checks. You know, there was cash flow problems. You'd prepare checks and put them in a drawer, many of them, a bundle. And so people come, and there was a big black book which was called check register. So the suppliers come, and checks are issued through that register. So depending on how nice you talk to the accounts department, then your check is released. Yet the one for Honorable Speaker even goes stale after 6 months. Those are things that we can cure through a system where you have an accounting system which allows payments to be made on first come, first served basis. Thank you. Finally, Honorable Junet asked me a question I didn't expect to come from him, but I expected to come. Mr. Speaker, I've been asked about bottom-up. Bottom-up economic transformation agenda. That is how it is called. Let me tell you, through you, Mr. Speaker, tell Honorable Junet this, that bottom-up is actually a concept of UDA, read Kenya Kwanza. But I want to tell him that if you look at the philosophy of UDA and ODM, there is no difference. Actually, the two are social democrats.
Yes.
The two political parties promote social democracy. But let me leave that for that. Look at better. What is it all about? It talks about job creation. It talks about cost of living. It talks about agricultural productivity. It talks about digital economy. What about ODM? What was in our manifesto? We talked about the same. Actually, the better concept is on value addition. Now, ODM manifesto, which I participated in drafting, we had manufacturing, emphasizing on agriculture as raw material. So it is manufacturing supported by agriculture.
Did you read Animal Farm?
I read it some time back, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
But now, better is on value addition.
Yes.
For agriculture for value addition. ODM, agriculture for manufacturing. Semantics. But again, finally, Mr. Speaker, housing was our concept, both of us. But finally, Mr. Speaker, there is the Constitution and the PFM Act, which will guide my conduct in office, if approved. Thank you.
Naisula? Yes.
If you allow me, Honorable Speaker, just a supplementary on one of the things John Mbadi said around workings of the National Treasury and your work as a member of Parliament, the abuse of Article 223.
Yes.
And you know, since we were both in the Budget Committee, this has been a huge problem. And it continues to date. You've had in the recent past very senior government officers trying to twist people in the National Treasury to pay even confidential expenditure out of Article 223. I want to hear what you intend to do to now stem from the root cause or where this problem emanates from, the National Treasury, abuse of Article 223. Lastly, when you spoke about the good things that we lost in the finance bill, you may or you may not agree with me that partially the problem was out of very poor communication by the National Treasury. Kenyans out there were left to just listen to what was being said by members of Parliament during debate on the finance bill to know what were the good things in that finance bill. How differently will you now, at the helm of the National Treasury, if approved by this committee, will you communicate to Kenyans to be able to know that a finance bill, as you said, is an omnibus bill? It has very many good things for the benefit of the country, which get lost in the misinformation and disinformation campaign that was there with the last one. So my question is, how will you shift the communication from the National Treasury? And with all respect to those who were there before, there was literally no communication coming from the National Treasury. How do you intend to change that? And I agree with you on the pending bills, but also tell you that probably what you also need to do is look at the procurement. For instance, and you've been a member of Parliament all these years, CDF. There are never any pending bills in CDF because of the system through which we procure. You only procure when you have exchequer with you. So probably if you get approved, that's one of the other things you need to look at, to remodel whatever is being done in mainstream government with CDF.
Mr. Speaker, go ahead. Okay.
Thank you, Speaker. To the nominee, Honorable Mbadi, you are on record in Parliament during debate of the last approval of the cabinet secretaries, and it's gone viral, widely known, that you referred to the cabinet secretaries then as skunks. Now you find yourself as one of the nominees. Are you a skunk? or are you not? The second question is that we have advisors who, I'm reliably informed, sit at State House, who advise the president on matters economy. You will be seated at Treasury. I would like to know, between if this committee and the National Assembly approves you, you will have your opinion, they will have their opinion. How do you marry the two to make sure that you're talking the same? Because we have seen in the public some of the advisors talking like they're not in the same government, like the way how they work. So I would like to know whether which supersedes the other, and how will you make sure that you work together on matters economy and as you advise the president. Finally, there's been allegations that in Treasury, we have people who've been there for so long, times have changed. You're seeing we are in very extraordinary times. We need to think extraordinary to get our country to where we want to be. How do we make sure once you're there, you are not held captive? Because we have seen other CSAs with very good credentials, even you. If approved, I don't know what happens when you go there. I don't know whether it is the system, you become captives of IMF, you become captives of what is going on. What will you do differently? Because we are in very extraordinary times, Mr. Nominee. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, allow me to, in response to the questions by Leader Majority, to start with the pending bills on. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I had a lot to say, but because of limitation of time, I left out something on the issue of pricing and general procurement and supply chain management. That is an area that we must address. It is what we would call addressing corruption. Mr. Speaker, if you are to buy omena in Kisumu and buy it in Kericho, despite even the transport cost, you are almost buying it at the same price. But in the same government building, 5th floor, 10th floor, buying the same item at different prices. We cannot continue like that as a country. We must find a system of standardizing our prices. And again, there has been talk about automation. End-to-end procurement must now be implemented. We cannot procrastinate further. Kenyans are crying for value for money. Kenyans are talking about economy in the use of our resources. That must be realized by deliberately ensuring that we automate procurement, from the budgeting to procurement, to receipt of goods, to payment. It must be end-to-end. This idea of saying we will implement it in July, that resources are becoming more and more scarce. We must make sure that the little resources that we'll collect, and that is the responsibility of CS Finance, by the way, to ensure that there is proper accountability and transparency in the use of public resources. On the issue...
Mbadi, are you saying that we, apart from the IFMI system, the IFMI system is not working?
It is not end-to-end. IFMI system is, the procurement is broken. It is not end-to-end. They will tell you we have automated procurement. It's not true. So we must make sure that from budgeting all the way to payment and even use of goods, it is seamlessly integrated. We must do that. Mr. Speaker, and they have pushed that to January. They have been pushing that automation. Every time they push it, the time comes, they push it. If procurement is pushed, another date is given. So there must be a stop to that, and that stop, hopefully, will be under my leadership at the Treasury. On the issue of...
if we approve you, in how many days will you achieve this?
I want to work with the new set deadline of January, so that we don't pass January again. Okay. Yes. The communication, I am in total agreement. In fact, the reason why we lost the finance bill was communication. And this we must change. And by the way, one thing that I would want to talk about and maybe advise the current government, now that I'm going to sit at the highest policy decision-making body, if approved, is that we must improve on our communication. All departments, communication cannot be left to one individual called communication, Honorable Mwaura, no, government spokesman. We must have every ministry and department communicating explicitly and clearly to Kenyans. And Treasury is going to lead. I have already inquired and found that we have a state-of-the-art media center at the Treasury on 14th floor, Mr. Speaker. That must be utilized properly. But again, we must understand that the current generation would not be very comfortable with the conventional, the traditional ways of communicating. We must be innovative. We must use the current system of communication. I know I'm not in Gen Z, I'm not a millennial, but we must be responsive to the way they communicate. And my ministry will adopt modern methods of communication. The final one was from Honorable Shungwe, and it was the first one. What did you ask about the Finance Bill 2024? That
Finance Bill was on what you have actually
what I've just now Article 2 to 3.
Article 2 to 3 abuse.
Now, Honorable Shungwe and I have complained over the years about this Article 2 to 3 being misused and abused. Remember, Mr. Speaker, Ruaraka land was bought through Article 2 to 3. Which, if you look at the Constitution and PFM Act, is very clear on how we should apply or use Article 2 to 3. It was for a good intention, that before, that the government may find that there is something that should be addressed urgently, but there are not enough funds. Yet now we abuse it. We spend it on anything. Fortunately, it requires approval of the CS Treasury. And so if that abuse is to continue, it is John Mbadi, if you approve my nomination, who will continue with that bad habit. But I came up with a legislation, Mr. Speaker, not to cause any aspersion on this when I was just recently. I'm still a member of parliament anyway. I wanted to have some controls and checks on application of this Article 2 to 3. It was frustrated at the committee stage of the House, Committee of Finance. Why? Because Treasury refused to accept that legislation, where I wanted, before money is spent, before Cabinet Secretary approves, he should inform Parliament, give Parliament 17 days, just because Parliament is the one that has the constitutional mandate to approve expenditure. No any other body, even Cabinet Secretary. But now, it was frustrated. I hope another member will pick it up, now that I'm there, so that I don't resist it further. But I want to give guarantee in the meantime, with the current legal framework, I will not allow for abuse of this.
You become part of government, introduce us a government bill through the majority leader.
I will be very happy to take it up if he sends it as
Take
Minister
it to
now.
cabinet.
Thank you,
Hand over to majority.
But Mr. Speaker, let me just give confidence that this article will not be abused, even with the current legal framework. Okay? To the questions by Honorable Naisula, skunk. Mr. Speaker, let me say the following. Up to now, I'm a member of the National Assembly with a mandate to oversight, with a mandate to legislate, and to represent. Mr. Speaker, I have a duty, up to now, to vet and approve President's appointees. I must discharge that mandate properly. And that is what I did. I am moving to the other side of the executive. I will not have that mandate anymore. It is now the mandate of Honorable Naisula and the rest of us to determine whether John Mbadi is a skunk or not. I want to leave it there. On advisors, it is true, and by the way, you can't stop the president from having advisors, whether political, economic, or otherwise. He has that mandate, he has that authority to hire. The only thing I want to state is legally, I am the principal, or I'm going to be the principal, if approved, advisor to the president on matters finance. You advise, the person advised takes the advice or not. You cannot force the person you advise to take your advice. But I also believe that these people are professionals like me. So we would be engaging at one point and agreeing or disagreeing, but the final decision will be taken by the cabinet, which is chaired by the president. Finally, the only caution I would give is if you are an advisor, please make sure the person you advise communicates. Don't communicate on behalf of the person you advise. So if I have advisors today, what I would do is to tell my advisors, please make sure when you advise me, I communicate the advice.
The rule of thumb, advisors are never known.
Thank you.
They are backroom operators.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Finally, it's about, you are very polite. They call them Treasury mandarins. The people who frustrate the efforts, the good efforts of the Treasury. I don't want to call them Treasury mandarins. Some of these gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, are actually very experienced. Almost all of them, by the way, very experienced economists, accountants, finance experts, etc. It is just about leadership. I'll provide leadership at the Treasury so that we make sure that we work for the interest of this country. If there are gaps, I want to call them gaps. If there are gaps in resource capacity or human resource capacity at the Treasury, I will liaise with the relevant authorities to make sure that those gaps are filled. Thank you.
Yes, Nelson.
Maybe even
one question.
Yes, Honorable Mbadi. Maybe even
hijacked and asked three. Ask one question each so that others can also ask.
Maybe even consider further shuffling some of those senior Treasury officials. I'm told that the mafia and the cartel there is so strong that they decide on when to send an exchequer, to release an exchequer where. So that you find agencies, some of the agencies are 60, 70% or 90% on consumption of the exchequer, yet you have others that are still lagging at 40, 50% way towards the closure of the financial year. So they are very powerful, and I think it is just not about, leadership. It's about also trying to shuffle those senior cartels that are there in the Ministry of Finance. And please do it if this committee approves you. Mine that was a comment. And a question, is the exchequer, not exchequer release, on shareable revenue to the counties? The law says the 15th of every month, the shareable revenue should be released to the devolved units. It has never been done in the last 10 years. What will you do different to make sure that our counties receive their shareable revenue on time?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Mbadi, should you be approved? This country is in ICU. It's in my look, it's in ICU. Number two, the success of all other cabinet secretaries that Parliament might approve, which now seems to be an alumni of Nairobi University, the success or failure of cabinet secretaries will be
University of Nairobi.
University of Nairobi is now the cabinet is alumni of Nairobi University. But the success, Honorable Mbadi, should you be approved, is actually you. The success or failure of all of them will actually be you. So my question is this. What took us where we are from the public is opulence. It is the behavior of public servants and government servants vis-a-vis the performance of our economy. The talk of a performance of our economy is that it is very bad. The behavior and the look of the people who work in government is that it is very good. And I will give you an example. A minister driving a Prado, and then he has a chase car, which is a Prado. And actually two of them, I have seen this on the road. Since this problem, I have not seen any government or minister's car. I don't know if they have hidden them or not. But the truth of the matter is the behavior of the government servants and the performance of economy is not actually commensurate. So my thinking, Honorable Mbadi, if you look at what you are saying, these are long-term, medium-term. I would propose, should you get this opportunity, let the minister drive a maximum car of 2,000 cc. Do what Kibaki did during Kibaki, so that the behavior of government servants and the behavior of economy actually goes together. But if you don't do that, Honorable Mbadi, that the people of Kenya will see, then you will be actually a failure. Maybe mine is a comment, Honorable Speaker, but that is a very big comment. What is your opinion, Honorable Mbadi? I thank you, Speaker.
Take the third, Kikaria.
Thank you, Honorable Chairman. Mine, first of all, is for the public out there. There has been this clamor that the president does appoint political appointees into. I think John Mbadi is answering them. They are out there. John Mbadi is making a good account to answer that question to the public. My question is to the nominee is this. Currently, you're the chairman of PAC, and the auditing financial statement usually are 2 years or 3 years in delay. The Auditor General's report, which is a very important report for purposes of oversight, usually come late, maybe 2 or 3 years behind. What steps will you take to expedite the conclusion and consideration of the audit report in Parliament? Thank you, Honourable Chairman.
John, I'm reading what the public is sending to us.
Thank you.
Put to you later. Go on now. Answer Nelson.
Yeah, I will start from Honorable Nelson, the Chair, Defense and Foreign Relations. On the issue of transfers or shuffling at the Treasury, what I would say is I'm going to look at the Treasury in its totality and see if there are gaps and if there are areas where we can change people, move one person from one place to the other. But to me, the most important thing to do is to have a system that functions. Because if you don't have a system that functions, whoever you bring may just mess you up. So we need a system that is functioning, a system that even if I'm away, would still ensure that what should be done is done. The issue of favoritism, where some MDAs get funded and others are not, that to me is a failure of the system. We must correct that and ensure that there is equity, that there is fairness, that the system serves all Kenyans equally. So it is about system. Once you put the system in place, the officers you will put will do what is required. On the issue of shareable revenue going to counties, you are addressing, Honorable Nelson, you are addressing a converted person. I am a supporter of devolution, and I know that we need to support our counties. Counties are struggling at times, and a lot of times. In fact, we are incurring a lot as a country by failing to send monies to counties within the required time. Why? Because counties end up borrowing money from commercial banks and pay huge interests on borrowed funds just to pay salaries. We must make sure that we reverse that. I know there are revenue constraints, but we must balance. We must manage our cash flow. That will be my responsibility. One of the most important and critical departments at the Treasury is that Department of Accounting, the department that deals with managing the cash flow. Honorable Kosing, I hear you. A lot of opulence, a lot of wastage. By the way, even the reconstitution of this cabinet is as a result of, is actually a direct consequence of show of opulence, which made some Kenyans mad, to the extent that now the president had to be forced to do certain things which he shouldn't have done, really. So we must contain wastage. We must contain wastage, but we shouldn't be mechanical about it. In my view, we should contain it practically. One of them is to reduce our operating expenditure. We must make our budget transparent. This idea of lumping budget lines and saying other operating expenses must go from our budget. What are these other operating expenses? We must be clear. If we are paying for mileage, Mr. Speaker, for example, let it be known. We know that members of parliament have to be facilitated to go to the constituency. I'm not saying that is parliament that is putting, actually parliaments rarely put block figures.
It's good to use us as an example.
Yeah, but I'm giving parliament as an example. But there are ministries, departments, which do that. Mr. Speaker, have you asked yourself why we still have one officer, a driver, taking impress for 200 staff for a training? Yet every member of staff has an IFMIS number. Let each person get a per diem allowance or imprest and comes back and accounts for it, like it happens in Parliament. Anytime I move out of the country, I am given my imprest. I come back and account for it directly. It's not never given to clerks. But you go to ministries, there is lump sum amounts, imprest, you find someone taking 3 million. These are wastages that we must work on and control. Finally on that, Mr. Speaker, and as I said, we must work on procurement. That to me is the elephant in the room. On Honorable Gikaria, I know Kenyans have not had kind words for political appointees, but I also want to tell Kenyans out there that being in a political office is just a calling. Actually, it is them who elect us to those offices. It doesn't take away our training, background, and professional experience. I have said I've worked for 28 years. I am a professional, just like any other professional, whether in politics or in private practice or in otherwise. Remember, Mr. Speaker, I didn't say this. This Public Finance Management Act, my signature is here. I was in the task force which did this Public Finance Management Act. We were with the former CS Rotich. We were with Kamau Thuge, who is now the governor of Central Bank. We were with Professor Malombe, or I don't know whether it's Dr. Professor Malombe, who is now the governor Kitui, and myself, paid by World Bank to prepare this Public Finance Management Act, which is used by everybody. I'm a professional, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in 2011, you remember, and we were with you in the National Assembly, consulting with Mass Group. I was their consultant. We came up with the 10 million error in the budget. I'm the one who brought it to the House, which became known as computer error. As a professional, I made sure that Kenya, and by the way, Treasury agreed that that was an error. Remember, there were professionals at the Treasury, yes. But the professional who is a politician is the one who discovered that there was computer error. So I want to just give confidence to the public that even when you're a politician, you can be a professional. Finally, on chairing PAC and financial statements that are in arrears, the confidence is this, Honorable Gikaria, that beginning with Honorable Wandai, who is my predecessor, to my committee, we have really tried to be up to date. In fact, I am leaving that chair when we have just concluded examining accounts for 2021-2022. We were planning to have the report in the House in July. Unfortunately, because of the events that we are all aware of, that report, I'm sure, will be tabled in August. Then we'll only be remaining with 2022-2023, because 2023-2024 has not been audited. It will come next year, like February. The committee that I'm leaving in place, I am sure before the end of this fiscal year, will be done with 2022-2023 and table their report. So we'll be up to date. There should be no worry at all. The National Assembly has done a lot of justice to our audited accounts. But, Mr. Speaker, you'll allow me to mention that we need to give more resources to our Auditor General to do special audits, do forensic audit, because this financial audit that we are paying too much attention to is not going to help us really improve financial management. In my office, if you approve me, I will persuade the cabinet to give more resources. We can afford to give more resources to Auditor General to save much more, because we are losing so much. Special audits, and I've left quite a number, which I asked the Auditor General to do. If you look at those special audits on the Stadia, 3 of them I'll mention. One is on Article 223, Mr. Speaker. It is there in Parliament, and the committee will deal with it. There's another one on fertilizer. All these issues that we are talking about are in that report. Number 3 is on Stadia. Serious mismanagement of resources or in construction of our Stadia across the country. If you look at that report, you would be very happy with the work of the Auditor General, as opposed to financial report. So we should really give more resources to the Auditor General to do special audits so that Kenya can save money which is being wasted through corruption. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mary Emasi, the Honorable.
Thank you, Chairman. Nominee, my questions to you start from a statement you've just made to Kenyans, confirming that in the collapsed finance bill 2024-25, that indeed there were good clauses or good intentions for Kenyans. And that is why some of us who voted yes believed in incorporating the views of Kenyans through public participation, removing the bad and approving the good therein. Having said that, one of the reasons why we've been judged harshly by Kenyans, and again you've alluded to that, is the miscommunication. How we communicated the contents in the finance bill to Kenyans, which was surrounded by a lot of propaganda. Now my question to you, how best do you think that we should communicate to Kenyans? How best should we do public participation going forward? Because you are the one who is going to bring to us the next finance bill. Secondly, you've also spoken to the aspect of revenue raising. And you've said you're going to look at, have a dialogue with KRA and see how best to improve KRA. Do you believe by just restructuring or reorganizing KRA, we will be able to raise sufficient revenue to finance our budget? If not, what other revenue raising measures do you intend to bring on board, because you're the one who will be bringing to us the finance bill? Last but not least, we have interns in KRA. Some of them have been serving for the last 3 years and just getting stipends. They have not been confirmed. Yet I'm also aware that KRA is understaffed. For them to realize the objective, they need to be staffed properly. What are your thoughts? What are you going to do about it? And finally, the last one.
One at a time.
The last one, Honorable
You've
Speaker.
hit 2 already.
Just the last one. Again, a nominee in the supplementary estimates 1 for 24-25. We have rationalized expenditure for all sectors in pursuit of fiscal consolidation. And this is adversely affecting some of the social safety nets that are likely to affect the most vulnerable members of the society. How do you intend to turn around the economy so that you cushion Kenyans to prevent negative impact on their welfare? Thank you.
Members, at least be conscious of your colleagues also queuing to ask questions.
Chair, my apologies. We've worked with the nominee in the budget and appropriations, and we're also in the same line. So I had a number of questions. Thank you.
Divorce and due familiarity with the nominee, and interview them in the manner we have been interviewing others. Dawood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
One question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The nominee, Honorable Mbadi, the division of revenue for the county governments was reduced because of the failure of the 2024-2025 finance bill falling. And now, subsequently, the finance bill 2023 has been declared unconstitutional. Do you, in your opinion, think that again you will ask for the division of revenue from 380 billion going to the counties going down again? Secondly, is the tax policy, being an accountant of long standing, there has to be, tax has to be simple and not be changing each and every other day. You have to give businesses time to recover, because if you change tax policy every other year, how do people plan on what they are going to do? Because that is the other issue. You talked about pending bills as well. You said they should not be paid, or you will have a system. What kind of system are you talking about? You're saying they will not be paid, or you will pay them, but in what manner will you pay them? Thank you.
Murugara as well.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Nominee, the Honorable John Mbadi. To the eyes of Kenyans, you are actually the treasurer of the country. You are the one who is going to be responsible for everything that we treasure, especially our money. The first limit is, would you be able to take a stand and keep that stand firm? Will your yes be a yes and your no be a no? And if so, Kenyans know very well that the reason why we are where we are grossly is because of pilferage of public resources. And everybody knows what the Auditor General, whom you propose to be funded, has been reporting year in, year out. But not one, not two have been taken to court or any form of action taken where it is glaring that public resources are actually being wasted. If this committee affirms you to be the CS Treasury, can you tell Kenyans whether you would actually stand with them to have all thieves, corrupt people, everybody who has pilfered, being brought to book to take responsibility for that crime?
Can I answer those, Honorable Mbadi?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Through you to address the questions raised by Honorable Massey. Honorable Massey, I can't overemphasize the value of communication, and I would repeat again that one of the weaknesses of the Finance Bill 2024 is that it was not explained properly. And remember, there was this tax on motor vehicle. No one could explain why it was necessary. The people, some of the people or speakers the government sent or Treasury sent to explain it even made a mess of the explanation by saying that this is to increase or enlarge the tax base. Yet almost every one of us who owns vehicles, we pay taxes in one way or the other. So communication is key. Public participation, I think National Assembly, Senate, we need to come up with a clear legislation on public participation. Given the recent events at the courts, we must. This is a priority, and I am looking straight at the majority leader and the minority leader. Then the Speaker, Mr. Speaker, kindly help the government get a legislation in place if the government has not prepared one already.
AG is working on one.
The AG is working on one, I hear. That is very good. So, yes, I don't want to say that there was propaganda or otherwise. You know, if the animal had become bad, Mr. Speaker, in the eyes of Kenyans, the Public Finance Management Bill 2024. So reasoning was thrown off the window, and everybody believed it should be defeated. So I think that is what, but that is because of the communication. On the issue of, so you see, at the beginning, for us to communicate effectively on any matter that comes from government, first there should be believability. I think trust level has gone down. We must build it. We must rebuild trust level. The government must rebuild that trust level. On revenue collection, there are many other measures, but the most important is we must clearly have a state-of-the-art system to collect our taxes. Other revenue-raising measures, I want to mention that we must now think through methods that would generate revenue off balance sheet. One of them is climate change financing. Climate change has a lot of money out there, $1.3 trillion US. We must tap into that money to reduce pressure on the budget. My colleague and friend Honorable Duale's budget should heavily be funded from the climate change financing. Kenya has already applied and has succeeded in securing $259 million US, which will go to 47 counties. It should also help us generate or create jobs for our youth. Another one is PPPs. And Mr. Speaker, allow me to say something about this. You know, we must adopt public-private partnership as a country. But this is going to be very difficult because already the public don't understand PPPs. You can see the issue of JKIA, Mr. Speaker. It's because the public does not understand PPPs. But PPPs is the route to go. We just need to be clear. We just need to have the framework in place. I must give capacity because it is resident in Treasury. Capacity to that department dealing with PPPs. Not just look at the big projects. Mr. Speaker, we must also apply PPP even in small projects to reduce pressure on exchequer. For example, I'll give you an example, which I learned recently, that Kerio Valley Development Authority has a 2-acre land here at Upper Hill, and they had got a private investor to develop offices on that plot for government offices. That request was sent to the National Treasury, and it is gathering dust until they gave up. We must embrace PPP, not just for big projects, across level. And your guess is as good as mine why people focus more on big projects and not the small ones. Road sector, in terms of even maintenance of the roads, in terms of even developing new ones, but we must clearly do evaluation and see if they can work. There is the energy sector, even agriculture, irrigation, we can do PPPs, even the communication, all sectors of the economy, so that we reduce pressure from the exchequer. On staff at KRA, I think I dealt with this before, that we need to look at the staffing staffing of KRA and give them capacity and fill in the gaps. If there are people who have been serving on contracts for a very long time, it's not even, that is not even permissible in terms of human resource management. There is a period through which you can work as a temporary staff. On supplementary one, how do we turn around the economy? This one, I have a lot to say, but I don't want to say so much that I have, because it may take the whole day. Let me just, in 1 minute, summarize. Why is it that our economy grows at 5.6% but is not felt? You need to look, Mr. Speaker, and assess where we have the economic growth in this country. It's mostly agriculture and social and services sector. Agriculture is known not to be very good in raising revenue for the economy. Not very good in raising revenue, world over. Why? Because it's largely informal. Now, we must treat agriculture not as an end in itself. We must invest in agriculture, but with a different mindset. We invest in agriculture to support manufacturing, because manufacturing creates more jobs, manufacturing grows economy much more. Vision 2030, our intention was by 2030, we hit a minimum of 10% GDP. We must do that by working on manufacturing. I want to leave it at that. On Honorable Dayu's question, division of revenue, my view is we shouldn't cut any further the monies that we allocate to counties. Otherwise, we will kill devolution. This was a masterstroke with this constitution. We must, and we owe it to future generations to protect devolution at whatever cost. And that is why in the PFM Act, the moment we approve money to counties, you cannot reduce money that goes to counties, even if there is a shortfall in revenue collection. That was meant to protect the counties. One of the functions given to Treasury is to protect the county governments. And I would not fail in my constitutional obligation to protect the counties. Taxation, I cannot agree with you more. Our tax laws are sometimes too complicated, making it very hard for taxpayers. In fact, it is causing taxpayer apathy. One of the principles of taxation is simplicity, fairness, equity. Our tax system is not simple. In fact, I just forgot to carry. I wanted to read to this committee, Mr. Speaker, a provision in the, do I call it defeated or withdrawn finance bill of 2024? Clause 12, calculating minimum tax, top-up tax. You need to be a very smart accountant to calculate that. Lot of formula, different jargons. You cannot have such kind of legislations and expect to collect revenue. So we need to simplify our tax laws and tax system. If there are, I'm going to work around and check the tax laws that are complicated, that are causing us to lose money. Because when taxpayers realize that it is very difficult and complicated and costly to comply, they will not comply. So we must lower the cost of compliance to taxation. Pending bills, will I pay or not? It is not even me to pay. Authentic bills must be paid. Bills that can be confirmed. And my comment is we must put a stop. Going forward, there should be no discussion anymore on pending bills. Let us deal with the historical bills and pay them. But going forward, let us not allow MDAs to accumulate more pending bills. And by the way, you'll remember, I have a constitutional mandate. Actually, it is in the statutes. If a accounting officer fails to do what should be done, we can withdraw that power from accounting officer. And that power is with the Cabinet Secretary for Finance. So I am not scaring anyone, but let them be on notice that if you are not going to do what is provided for in the PFM Act, please, you will not be an accounting officer of the government of Kenya. On Mrugara's questions, will I be firm? This one I think Honorable Mrugara has an answer. Because, you see, those who know me...
He wants to hear from the horse's mouth.
Yeah, those who know me know my level of firmness. That does not mean I'm disrespectful. You must know who your boss is. You must know where your loyalty lies. But loyalty does not mean that you must be a yes person. I have, in a number of occasions, disagreed with my party leader, who was my boss in the party. You wouldn't know about it out there. Honorable Junet would know. Family, but I don't talk about it, because then that would be disrespectful. So if I am told to do what I should not do, I will not do it, if it is not provided in law. Because my duty number one is to protect, safeguard the Constitution. I hope that answers.
Owen?
On the last one.
Yes.
On pilferage of public resources, I think this.
It has been the streak
that
of
I have
answers.
addressed even previously.
It has
Thank
been
you.
the streak of your answers. Owen?
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, Honorable John Mbadi. Two quick questions. One, VAT refunds and tax refunds is actually one of the loopholes that people use to pilferage funds in this in the government. And you're an accountant, you understand this, I've heard you talk about it. Now that you're in that seat, how are you going to ensure that we don't continue to lose funds through tax refunds, especially VAT refunds? What mechanism will you put? And courts have been used as a means to sabotage government, that people, if you must give back money to taxes, they rush to court, and a lot of money actually is held. Billions of shillings is held because there are court cases, and therefore government cannot access it. What are you going to do to unlock that money, reduce corruption in terms of VAT, and ensure that there's enough cash flow? Secondly, equally, I know you're a believer in constitutionalism. If you look at the Constitution, it's very clear. You have money for counties, you have money for national government. There's also another fund called Equalization Fund, for which many cabinet secretaries have never taken it seriously. And therefore, they pay counties, they pay national government, but Equalization Fund is put under the carpet. And actually, it is Treasury which manages it, unlike the other funds, and therefore they never, and yet Constitution is very clear on Equalization Fund, but this money has never, I think it was disbursed only once. If approved, John Mbadi, what are you going to do about it? Lastly, John.
Thank you.
This is very important.
Two questions.
This is very important, Speaker, if you allow me. You have, in your career in Parliament as a public, I don't want to call you a politician, but a public service servant. You have disagreed a lot with a lot of the issues that have come from Treasury. A lot in Parliament. You have disagreed. Those are actually prepared by mandarins that you will find there. You know, and especially on finance bill and matters finance, you've agreed with them totally in almost everything, as you've been leader of a minority in. How are you going to change? Are you going to change the people?
or you will become, there's a popular saying that same monkeys, same forest. Are you going to be one of the monkeys now there? Or are you going to say, I want all the monkeys out and you become the bigger monkey and manage? Thank you.
Robert?
Yeah, thank you, Speaker. From skunks to monkeys. Now, Speaker, you'll allow me 2 quick questions, one on integrity and the other one on capacity of the nominee. And from the words of the nominee, trust level has gone down, and that's one of the problems we are facing. Now, this is a public office that you've been nominated to that requires serious public trust. I want to take you back. Today you've admitted that there are very many good provisions that were lost in the finance bill. In fact, you're looking for ways by which you will be able to redeem. But you on the floor vehemently opposed this finance bill. In fact, at every clause you said, reject the bill. So now, doesn't this make you appear pretentious, deceitful, and probably a master at doublespeak? And why should Kenyans trust you? Because you've been on record and Kenyans watched and listened to you. Now, on the other bit, still on integrity, we've had this case that one of your predecessors ended up in court on the issue of the dams, Aro and Kimwarer. I was in Parliament with you and we discussed this severally on the floor. These are payments that were made when, in fact, even the feasibility studies probably had not been completed. How will you make sure that these kind of payments will never again materialize from Treasury? And now on the issue of capacity, as Azimio, where you are a member until just the other day, we were alarmed by the Kenya Kwanza plans to increase taxes and borrow more, and we are saying we are not even seeing the development out of that money. Noting that Kenyans do not want punitive and excess taxes, and at the same time, the young ones have said they don't want us to borrow. Can you tell us how you will navigate that space?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, nominee, Honorable Mbadi. Honorable Mbadi, you are getting into Treasury, whereby our health sector is extremely underfunded based on the Abuja Declaration and the United Nations recommendation on how countries should finance the health sector. In Kenya, the health sector highly depends on donors, and the donor basket is shrinking, and United Nations is requesting countries to increase domestic financing. The challenge comes whereby the resources within the country are also shrinking. How do you tell Kenyans that they will enjoy universal health care and quality health care with the kind of scenarios I've explained, and how will you navigate to make sure that money sent from national government to county government, in preview that health sector is devolved, are ring-fenced for Kenyans to get health quality service at the county government as a minister for, as a nominee, and if you are approved by this government, this committee, how will you make sure that the finances meant for health sector really goes to the health sector in this country?
You can answer those.
Thank you. Let me start with, Mr. Speaker, let me start with the questions directed to me from Honorable Owen Bayer, the Deputy Leader of Majority. On VAT refunds, Mr. Speaker, we have the tax, this is what we call the tax expenditure. It is costing us quite a bit, in fact, almost $500 million every year to refund taxes, a lot of which are fictitious. It means there is a problem with the system, and that system must be corrected. But again, I think we need to, as a tax expert, and Mr. Speaker, I think I'm one of the people who can explain clearly the difference between zero rating and exempt commodities in this country. But I don't want to bore you with those explanations. I just want to mention that I think we need to have a conversation whether those items which we need to subsidize through VAT so that we don't expose Kenyans to untold sufferings as a result of high cost of living, we may think of most of them go to exempt categories so that we avoid the zero rating of commodities, which result in tax refunds. Because tax refunds is largely, especially on VAT, as a result of zero-rated commodities. Yes, the prices will slightly increase because zero-rated commodities become cheaper in the long run if it is properly administered. And I want to be very careful there, because the zero-rated commodity, sometimes the benefit is not passed to the consumers. So we need to emphasize and have almost every item that we want to still subsidize under VAT under exempt commodity. Then you will eliminate the issue of tax expenditure in that line. The other issue is also on the advanced taxes that we pay. We must have a system that captures these advanced taxes properly so that when finally the taxpayer files returns, they don't claim tax refunds which they don't merit. Then we will minimize the issue of tax expenditure. On equalization fund, I can't agree with you more. This fund must be operationalized. I know there are some challenges. When I get to the Treasury, if you approve my nomination, Mr. Speaker, I will find out what are these challenges. I'm told there are issues about whether to use counties or areas. The Constitution actually talks about areas. It doesn't talk about counties. But we should also not spread it too thin, because we know it is stemming from Article 201, Mr. Speaker, where there should be inclusivity, there should be equity in developing our country, using our public resources to develop the country uniformly. So we should not spread it too thin. There are certain regions in this country which have been marginalized over the years, from Sessional Paper number 10 of 1965. Those regions deserve attention, and we had only 20 years to do this. I know Parliament can change that, but why don't we utilize that properly? So when I get to the Treasury, I will make sure that this fund is properly operational. Every year the money is released. It's not even a lot of money to attend to issues of health, roads, electricity, and water. It's only targeting 4 areas. Finally, on that matter, Mr. Speaker, I speak with passion because I know what marginalization is all about. Mr. Speaker, I recognize myself both as a Luo and as a Suba. My mother is a Luo, or the late mother was a Luo. My late father was a Suba. So because in our society, you take your father's ethnicity. I'm so a Suba, so I am a Suba. Subas don't even constitute 2%, so we are a minority. I know what it means to be marginalized. I have been disagreeing with the National Treasury. No, I have not actually been disagreeing. I've actually
You've been holding just a different opinion.
Yeah, a different opinion. And by the way, now those opinions, we will have difference of opinion, Mr. Speaker, at the source. So it doesn't have to come to Parliament. Those opinions, the differences will now be at the source.
And they will be harmonized there.
And they will be harmonized, and I will finally, Mr. Speaker, take the same to the cabinet. I'm the one who will be defending these tax measures, or whatever it is, whether budget estimates, or it is BPS. I'm the one who will now be presenting them to the cabinet. I must present something that I'm convinced, I understand, and I agree with. But that does not mean that only my ideas will have to be taken. No, you must accept also to be advised. These people have wealth of knowledge. Some of them know probably even more than I do in matters of economics. So I will listen to them, but I'll take the responsibility. Honorable Mbui is now not trusting me. But Mr. Speaker, you know Honorable Mbui was actually my deputy for 5 years. And he knows that I can be trusted. On the rejection of the bill, Mr. Speaker, we understand the circumstances. Actually, we were responding to Kenyans. And I was actually, Honorable Junet is helping me by telling me the whip was applied. I am a very faithful and loyal member of it. By the way, I have been a member of the Economic Council of Azimio, advising the leader of Azimio on economic matters. And I was convinced that even though there were some good provisions in the bill, which I mentioned when I was contributing on the floor of the House, you gave me 5 minutes as a speaker. And I said there are some good ones, but the bad ones now have made the good ones look bad. You know, and so the public made a referendum. There was a referendum, an official referendum by the public on this bill. Mr. Speaker, if you looked at the social space, everybody was saying reject. And since I am representing people, not stones, not animals, I had to listen to the people and do what they wanted, Mr. Speaker, by rejecting the bill. So there is no inconsistency. My trust the level is still where it was on the Bumbui. And by the way, I don't think I'm not a member of Azimio. I am, only that I'm not an official of Azimio. I mean, I'm not holding any political office. I'm still a member of ODM, by the way. On Arao and Kimwarer, that, I must say, contracts in this country, Mr. Speaker, and my stint as the chair of Public Accounts Committee has taught me something, that the contracts that we sign, especially financial contracts, are lopsided. They are helping the lenders more than they help the country. Why on earth would you start paying interest on money that you have not received? I don't understand it. I don't get it. And this is why I'm saying when I get to the Treasury, if you approve my appointment, my nomination, I will have to get the opinion of the Attorney General. Because you find a lot of money, Mr. Speaker. It will come in the report of Public Accounts Committee. We pay so much money on undrawn funds because it is provided in the contracts. And so those issues around Aurora and Kimwarer and such like equivalent projects, Honorable Mbui, have confidence, will not happen during my tenure. Finally, on Honorable Mbui, how would we navigate the lack of funds? We know there's lack of sufficient exchequer in this country, and that's why we have to divest and move to other areas which are off balance sheet, as I've mentioned before. But more importantly, our project management system. We have 437, Mr. Speaker, that is the latest data that I have, of stalled projects. This is where we have invested money, but they have become white elephants. We must value these stalled projects and see those ones which we can pick up, take them up, and complete them. Those which you can treat as sunk cost, then discontinue them. But, Mr. Speaker, there should be coordination between national and county governments. You find a huge government project, national government project, which was developed even from 10 years ago, in a county, lying there, yet a county government is constructing another state-of-the-art a block of offices. Why can't we have a system where national government can surrender to county government some of these bills so that they can complete and use them? On Honorable Mule, Mr. Speaker, I'm trying to move fast. I hope I'm doing justice to all the questions. Honorable Mule, I know there could be underfunding. There is underfunding of the health sector. But I think health sector, we must look at it in totality. Before we even calculate how much we spend, we must find out how much national government is spending and how much county governments in total, 47 of them, because we have one country with 48 governments, which should be interdependent. So when calculating how much we spend on health, we should take it in totality and make sure that any money that is supposed to be devolved for health is devolved for health. We should not keep money at the national level here, implementing things on projects which should have actually been implemented by the counties, and have a coordination on how this is done. It may not be my exclusive, it may not be exclusive duty of this office that I'm supposed to get to. We have the Senate to oversight this. We have county assemblies, and we have and we have control of budget. We must work collectively. So that would address the issue of ring-fencing the money. We must allocate more resources to that department. Finally, Mr. Speaker, all this would only bear fruits if all agencies work together, including the EACC and other DCI and other agencies which help us in fighting wastage of public resources.
Good. Russell. Honorable Dida Russell.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Honorable John Mbadi, I think my entry is about the Treasury. reform in Treasury is really important. As it were, Treasury is being manned by, I think, 2 or 3 tribes. Kenya has 42 different communities. All of them should be represented where the national cake is being shared. Having said that, my question is on financial inequalities in this country, where most of the rural constituencies, communities, or areas are actually totally marginalized, and they are not part of the mainstream economy. The question is, if the House will give you the job, what are some of the initiatives you are likely to undertake so that places like Suba, Moyale, Mandera, Lamu are part of the mainstream economy of this country? Finally, is on what we call funds. People are keeping money in their homes because you are told, don't bank more than 1 million shillings a day. These are prescriptions, we are told, from the World Bank, the IMF, and the money is not in circulation in Kenya. And even in counties, where we are told people actually steal a lot of money there than in the national government, people are not banking money. What are some of the initiatives you are likely to undertake to make sure that actually Kenyans are confident that they'll be taking money to the banks, and it is more safer in the banks than when they are in their homes? Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Abdi Sharia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mheshimiwa John Mbadi. And for me, there's a team called the pensioners. You can imagine they've been working for maybe over 40 years, doing a lot of good work, contributing to nation building. But unfortunately, when they retire, and expecting now the nation to repay them back and so that they can enjoy their retirement in peace, they end up following their pension payments, sometimes for years. What are your plans to ensure long-term sustainability of pension schemes and the timely payment of pensions to the beneficiaries, considering the growing physical pressures? I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Ms. Shimbogo.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I have 2 questions, but they're very simple. My question number 1 to the nominee, Honorable Mbadi. You have seen recently that there have been public unrest due to economic hardship. What specific policy will you implement to stabilize the economy and restore public confidence in the Treasury? Kenyans are saying that you have been given that docket knowing that there's no money in the national coffers. And one of the reasons they're saying that it is the appetite in terms of borrowing. Why do we borrow beyond the ceiling, which has been put using our regulation or other policies? Why do we borrow for projects which cannot finance itself? For instance, there's this project of SGR, where we took a big loan from the Exim Bank in China, and up to date, it has been a challenge for us to finance that loan. Why do we sometimes just borrow using foreign currency, and when our shilling goes down, it becomes a big challenge to us? Why can't we just know that, are we taking non-concessional loans or are we taking concessional loans? And why are we taking conditional loans which are not favorable to our country? My second question, it is on economic inequalities, which remains very high in this country, with significant disparity between urban and rural areas. And that is why we had the narrative of hustlers versus royal, or rather versus bourgeoisie. to me, inclusive growth strategies are needed to ensure that marginalized groups benefit from economic advancement. How will you ensure that economic growth will benefit all segments of society, including marginalized community, especially the youth, the women, and persons with disability? I thank you, Honorable Chairman.
Can we take Mukami as well?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. My question is that there are many unclaimed financial assets that have not been claimed by rightful owners. What strategies will you employ to raise public awareness of the existence of these agencies to the public? The other thing, I really wanted to support you regarding KRA. There were very good system in KRA when they were recruiting the university graduates. And the government had invested a lot of money. In fact, they used to have even an intelligence department. And even those graduates were taken for training. Later on, I don't know what happened because all those graduates were fired. So what I would like to ask you, if you happen to get this chance, are you going to instate those people? Because they are trained, they know what they are supposed to do, instead of recruiting other.
You can answer those, John?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And honorable members, I'll start with the questions from Honorable Raso. On reforming Treasury, I think I talked about it, and I am committed to reforms at the Treasury. About 2 or 3 tribes manning the Treasury. Well, as a matter of fact, there has been discussion around this, and we are Kenyans. And if there are people who get positions just by virtue of being from specific communities, that should not be the case, and that should end.
But the context within which the question was asked was that then it also skews sharing of revenue.
Yeah,
but sharing of revenue is not done at the Treasury. It's done in Parliament, isn't it?
That's correct, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
Yeah, so, but...
where everybody is represented.
Yeah, but I think also on the issue of inclusivity, we need to be inclusive in all government ministries. Let's not just look at Treasury as alone.
Yes.
And by the way, Mr. Speaker, there was a talk that I'm most likely going to be the first cabinet secretary from my community. So that in itself, both, Mr. Speaker. I can't remember any other Luo who has ever been in that ministry. The only closest we came to is twice, when Tom Mboya was the Minister for Economic Planning, and when Anyang' Nyong'o was also Minister for Economic Planning.
And Adua
yeah, and Adua thrice. But National Treasury, no. But then that shows there's inclusivity, in my view. But yes, all ministries, there must be inclusivity. And in budgeting, Parliament does budgeting, and we are all represented in National Assembly. So there shouldn't be that discrimination. On financial inequality, I cannot agree with Honorable Raso more. We must find a system, and I'm going to ensure that is done, of equitable development of this country with the little resources that we have. Mr. Speaker, you've come to my constituency. Since independence, I will tell you, we have hardly. Now, in fact, the first time we saw a black surface in my constituency in terms of Tarmac Road was in 2017, when we had a small stretch, and then the work stopped. It's about 4 kilometers.
What would you say if you go to North Hor?
No, and I'm just giving you the example of my constituency.
Yes.
And I know it's worse even in other places.
Yes.
Where even having a Maram road that is usable is a challenge. So we must apply the resources of this country equitably. And that was the sense of devolution, but we must also make sure that the national government funds, which is still holding about 85%, is actually applied equitably. On the issue of keeping money at homes, we must strike a balance here, Honorable Raso. Yes, I know sometimes banks, because of the regulations and the policy that has been put in place by central bank, yes, that sometimes you go to the bank and your money, you know, sometimes I'm asked when my money comes from my SACCO, for example, Mr. Speaker, to my account, then I'm asked before I transfer it even to my wife, I'm told I must explain the source. And yet they could easily see this is from Parliament, this is from... So sometimes it can be discomforting. But we must balance that with international requirements, best practice. We are not operating in isolation, Mr. Speaker. Right now, through the Financial Action Plan Task Force, which is accepted internationally, and Kenya is a member of East and South African anti-money laundering group, where we have 22 countries. And actually, in this August, Mr. Speaker, I am likely, if you approve my appointment, to chair a council meeting of ministers on this matter. We have set rules that we have agreed on, that we have signed to, so that we are accepted. Our financial system is accepted globally. If we fail to comply to some of what we have signed for, Honorable Russell, we stand at the risk of being blacklisted from the international market, and that has attendant consequences, which we would not want to get.
Nominee, you know, the issue
yes.
on Russell's question is actually not banks making it difficult for people to deposit money over $1 million. I think it has been revised to 2. It's still 1 million.
I think it's still 1 million.
The issue is that the banks have completely misunderstood the concept and the philosophy. Because what the concept was is that if it is suspicious, you don't stop anybody from banking the money. But if it's suspicious, then you make a report to the Financial Reporting Center or any other authority. So people should not be prevented from banking money simply because it's over $1 million. But the moment the bank manager finds or feels that this money may be from a suspicious source, receive the money, hold it in abeyance, then he report. Because it's very risky for people to keep money in their homes.
It's true.
And that again comes to what I think Kimani Ichung'wah or somebody else said, communication. Communicate to the public. If a trader in Kikomba, now they do cashless, but many traders in many places receive cash. 5 million, 10 million. But they are afraid of going to the bank because there's a list of about 20 questions. Yes. Yes, and this is a cash economy.
Yeah, and actually,
you must simplify this.
Thank you, I get you. Mr. Speaker, and actually it distorts our financial system completely. I agree. But Mr. Speaker, maybe allow me just to say 2 things in response to that. One is that I agree that this has been interpreted differently by banks, and we know why. I personally know why. It is because there was a period, remember the NYS scandals and those scandals, many banks were forced to pay fines. So banks became too cautious. So I think what we may need to do, or what I would do once in office, if you approve my nomination, is to have a meeting with the Kenya Bankers Association and also with the central bank, so that this matter is clarified, so that it doesn't become a bottleneck for Kenyans to bank, because the most ideal is for Kenyans to have money in their bank accounts. On the issue of pensioners, I want to also, again, which has been raised by Honorable Shuria, pensioners not being paid. Apart from the time lag between the time you retire to the time you start getting your pension, and I think we need to treat our senior citizens better. You know, you have offered a service to the public. Now that you are supposed to enjoy some of the benefits of the money that was saved, or you saved, or was saved on your behalf, you need to. Mr. Speaker, in the year ending 30th June 2024, we failed as a country to pay pension to the tune of 26 billion shillings. These are Kenyans who have retired and did not get their pension. This is a matter that I want to agree, and it is something that I'd already picked up, that we will make sure that we pay pensioners as and when immediately they retire. And this can only be done.
If you get there,
yes,
John Mbadi, even as an MP, which you still are,
yes,
I'm sure you know that when you go to your constituent's office or your home, about 10–20% of elderly people who visit you are carrying papers of unpaid pensions for 10 years, even more.
I have many of the messages here, Mr. Speaker,
yes,
in my phone. So you are saying exactly what is correct.
Yes.
But, Mr. Speaker, I am happy that we changed the system of contributing to the pension in this country, because, again, the issue of sustainability comes about. The pension system that we have been running as a country was not sustainable, but with the superannuation scheme, we are likely now to keep abreast to the pension. But in the meantime, we must settle all the pensions that those pensioners who are eligible for receiving pension. And Mr. Speaker, I want to go to the questions raised by Honorable Mishi Mboko, the MP for Likoni. There has been economic unrest, let me call it unrest, largely attributable to economic conditions, and unemployment being key. Mr. Speaker, every government has a vision. We had the vision in 1965, the sessional paper. I remember when Kibaki came in, there was economic recovery strategy for growth and employment. That was 2003. Then we came to Vision 2030 in 2008, which has been broken down into 5-year medium-term plans. We are in the last medium-term plan. All these, if you look at them, especially now Vision 2030, which is operating at the moment, or obtaining at the moment, it was anchored on 3 pillars. The economic pillar, at least 10% growth, which we have not realized. There is a social pillar on equity, or inequality, or inclusivity. And then there is also the political pillar based on democracy and accountability to the people. If we follow this vision and model our philosophy to actualize that, then we will address the problem of unemployment, which is the single most important challenge that we have as a country today. In 2019, our population census was at 47 million plus. Out of that, Mr. Speaker, 35 million was people or Kenyans below 35 years, 75%. And this is a generation we have educated through free primary education and subsidized secondary education from 2003. Very ready for the market, no employment. That is why I was saying we need to shift our attention from using agriculture, which is the main driver of our economy, as an end in itself, to providing raw material for manufacturing so that we can create more job opportunities. With that, then we will be able to address this economic unrest, if I may borrow your word, Honorable Ms. Shimboko. And again, on economic inequalities, we need to, I am already thinking that World Bank is funding, although it is a loan, but very concessional loans, the social safety nets. We need not to put too much pressure on our expenditure. To free that money for other development activities, we get the World Bank to fund some of these safety net measures to remove inequalities that we have, even as we invest more money to the rural areas. Remember, both parties, let me repeat it again, the Kenya Kwanza has this belief on value addition, but also ODM and Azimio had a belief in investing in rural economy through making sure that we have even markets in rural areas, that we open up rural areas for development. If you do that, you will minimize and reduce inequality and create more jobs. Honorable Mukami asked about unclaimed assets. I must admit that personally I have not engaged a lot with this Unclaimed Assets Authority, but if there are reforms that are needed to ensure
I think what you should, if you get there, that is, improve is how to manage those unclaimed assets.
Yeah.
Take, for example, a person dies intestate, unmarried, but has relatives. You had a bank account to which you are the sole operator. You've left money there. The Unclaimed Assets Authority should get the banks to give them the details, which must be available, so that they publish for the next of kin of such fellows to come forward. But what they do is they just treat it as unclaimed assets and proceed to take the money. And that is not right. There is nobody in this country who has no relatives, not in Africa.
And Mr. Speaker, since this is a state enterprise and state corporation under my ministry, I will make sure that that is done. Actually, recently, I saw what one bank did. I will not give more details, but one bank reached out to beneficiaries of someone who died about 8 years ago, and they were still holding the money, and the beneficiaries came forth and got their money back. So that is what we should do with this authority. Finally, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, on Mukami. Yes. No, the other one, she actually agreed with me on the recruitment of staff.
Yeah, the other one is about the graduates who were trained.
Yes.
And they were fired.
KRA.
Yeah, in KRA.
Yeah.
And regarding the system, because now you know what is happening. You can imagine the KRA officers are going loud, correcting taxes from hairdressers, mama mboga, and yet there were systems. So that is why I was asking whether you reinstate those people, because the government had taken them for training.
Yeah, I actually said that there was a system in place of training graduates, and I think it was a very good system. Honorable Mukami agreed. Yes. As to reinstating those who probably should have remained on the payroll, that I cannot give a promise until I understand. Yes. You know, there are human HR issues and the legal issues. Unless I get to understand the technical issues, I may be talking about something that may not be tenable.
Chairman, I'm sorry, but part of my question was not answered. Chairman, I had asked in the issue of the ceiling on borrowing, and also I quoted one example of a borrowing which we did on the SGR project, where we borrowed a lot of money from Exim Bank from China. I've raised this issue because I don't want to see you repeating the same mistake which was done during the last regime, and that is why we're having a lot of challenges now financing that loan to China Exim Bank. You didn't say anything about that.
Although he had already said many things about commercial borrowing and concessional borrowing.
Maybe just to summarize it by saying that public project investment management is a challenge. And I said I will make sure that we are investing on viable projects, whether it is from local funds or borrowed funds. And I also mentioned, Mr. Speaker, if you can recall, that we will be linking loans to specific projects and making sure that the expenditure is, public procurement is followed and done prudently, efficiently, and economy for money of the shilling is realized.
Let's take the last one from Amisi.
That was it.
Yeah.
Caleb.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
One question.
Yeah, for being last, give me two, kindly. Thank you, Speaker. You know, also, I get an opportunity to listen to the entire interview when you are last, and you seem to be a person ready to disturb the stubborn status quo at the Treasury. But, you know, the former president of US, I think is Harry Truman,
once said that he actually had a plate like this one at his desk and written there, the buck stops here. So you might consider having such a plate on your desk and you write there, the buck stops here. Because, Mr. Speaker, the reason why you are in this job is actually from the reject the finance bill. So you are going to be at the center of budgeting and the financing for that budget. One of the ways of raising, we've said the revenue from the loans, borrow either domestically, externally, or grants. There is the aspect of domestic borrowing from the diaspora. I've studied 3 countries, Tajikistan, Nicaragua, and the Philippines, and even India. They have one of the highest diaspora remittance. And in fact, for Philippines, almost 35% of their GDP is from diaspora remittance.
26%.
26.
Yes.
Some countries are as high as 30. I've studied them. In fact, I'll give you a report. You also study. And if you can also zero down to diaspora and make something like a diaspora bond or diaspora infrastructure bond, where the government borrows from it, and the diaspora, because you see Kenyans demonstrating in London, because they have an interest in this country, wherever they are. So they fail to remit that money and invest here, and invest elsewhere. So we can tap into the global flow of income, basically, because we don't have the oil, we don't have the natural gases. So how do we maximize? That's something that I want you to really explain to me. And the last one, Speaker, at the aftermath of the World War, 700 delegates met in Mount Washington in Britain, New Hampshire. And they developed an international system. And that's where now the International Bank of Reconstruction and Development came in. The IMF came in. The purpose was for reconstruction for the World Bank. On this other hand, the IMF, the purpose was to stabilize currencies of various countries, stabilization, and to balance of payment. But this system has saturated our domestic policies. They have saturated our physical and monetary policies. So much so that a minister sitting at Treasury has World Bank in his head. He knows that in absence of this, I rush to World Bank. It's no longer a port of last call. It's now a port of first call. How do we dislink our development path from the continuous dependence on the brutal with institutions that were there to reconstruct Europe and Japan after the World War II?
Nominee, answer those quickly. We are running out of time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Go ahead.
Do I proceed? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Honorable Caleb Amitsi, the MP for Saboti, has actually noticed that I'm going to, and very ready to disturb the stubborn status quo at the Treasury. You could not be more right. Mr. Speaker, I am sure that His Excellency the President did not appoint me just to continue with the business as usual at the Treasury, because then there would be no need to make changes. He would have just continued with the person who was there. So I have an assignment to do. I will discuss with His Excellency the President on how to help reform the Treasury and to do it properly, and together with the Cabinet. On domestic borrowing and diaspora, I had a lot on how we can borrow more funds, whether green bonds, blue bonds, and floating diaspora bond. It's only that the time limitation, I could not mention all of them. But I want to agree with Honorable Caleb Amitsi that that is an area that we can tap on. And even look at ways of reducing transaction costs for diaspora remittances, because that's one of the reasons that you hear them complain a lot about. On IMF, by the way, I want to be very clear on IMF. IMF will never invite themselves to a country. We do invite them and agree with them on a program. There was a period we were not under IMF, but because of challenges occasioned largely by COVID-19 and the drought in the region, and also the global disturbance of the supply chain and all that, we then went back to IMF in 2020, 2021. But I have looked at what are these conditionalities. You know, sometimes we may blame IMF for nothing. We have agreed with them on a program, Mr. Speaker, that for us to tap onto that loan, what we must do, in fact, is one key thing: revenue mobilization. So we just need to agree on how we can convince IMF for the period that we are going to be under their program, which I don't think should be long. We must move to a system where we divorce ourselves from IMF and start depending on ourselves as we were before. But that we can only do by allowing, by doing what can be done in the interest of the country. They want us to maintain a deficit of no more than 4.4%. That's what we have agreed on currently. But we are moving towards, and we must move towards a budget deficit in the region of 2.5 to 3%. I know government has talked about 3.1. We can sustain a budget financing gap of 3%. With that, you will not need IMF intervention. And Mr. Speaker, I said, I want to end with that if we increase, we take back, don't even go to the ambitious 25% that we have set to ourselves of tax revenue to GDP. If we can take it back to 18%, we will be adding to this, to our exchequer, not less than 600 billion. And I think it is achievable. I believe it will be done.
Thank you, nominee. A quick run in a few issues thrown at us by the public. Some you have already spoken to. Are you aware that interest rates on loans are all-time high? What will you do to save Kenyans from exploitation by banks? Does Mbadi believe in single portal for tax revenue collection? How do you plan to position internal audit department to deal with zero-fault audit? Confirm or deny allegations of corruption at the University of Nairobi? I don't know whether when you are there or now, they're not saying. What are you going to do on unpaid refund from KRA for insurance agents? How will you expand tax base on how will you reduce tax evasion and increase compliance? Prioritize payment to UHC and JSS staff. Will you do that when you get in? How will you deal with late capitation to schools? Whether you will make public contracts like SGR with public with Kenyans, because Kenyans have been asking for that, just as you have said that you will make public debt public. Housing levy, will you tell Kenyans where this fund is domiciled? Is it in consolidated fund or is it in treasury bonds? Those are from the public. There is also, how will you promote the informal sector in Kenya? For instance, would you propose that all government offices procure locally manufactured furniture? Do you think that certain parts of the 2010 Constitution have contributed to a high public wage bill compared to GDP due to an excessively large administration? For instance, there are over 450 MPs, 1,500 MCAs, 47 county governments. If this is the case, what are your thoughts? Would you recommend that the president proposes a referendum to reduce the constitutional overload of the administration? Those are members of the public listening into this conversation. If you can deal quickly with those, I have only one question for you.
Chairman, there is another one regarding money laundering. What are you going to do about it?
So if you can run through all those. Some you have already talked about. You can.
Yeah. Actually, even the question by Honorable Mukame, I think I talked about that.
You did.
We are even hosting a regional body. Kenya is trying to comply.
Yes.
By the way, I would have talked. Mr. Speaker, I'll just pick on a few. Interest rate, I think we talked about.
The public watching these proceedings, and I think that's very good.
Interest rate is high. It's now at 13.3%. It has moved up. But part of the reason why monetary policy, CBK came up with this monetary policy was to reduce inflation. You know, it was at a point when inflation was very high. Our inflation had reached 9.6, 9.7% in 2022 October. So it had to come down. We had to cool the economy.
Yes, Junet?
The Speaker, nominee, interest rate is not at 13%. 13% is the CBK monetary policy rate. But the interest rates now banks are charging us 20%, 21%.
20 plus.
20 plus, not 13, Chairman.
Thank you, Honorable Junet, for helping. By the way, you know, when accountants...
You know, Junet is a trader, so he knows.
When accountants talk about interest rate, we only talk about the CBK rates, the interbank lending rates and all. So the rate, the base lending rate, is at 13.3%. Let me make it clear. And that gives rise to even 20% charged by banks based on risk assessment. So this was done to cool the economy. But I think when I made my initial contributions, I said it has reached a point where we have to now balance between controlling inflation and making money available to the private sector. Mr. Speaker, you remember there was a time banks were chasing us all over the place to take money using pay slips. It's not there anymore. Why? Because government has become the single most important customer to banks. So it is between chicken and egg. Which one comes first? Do we cut on our expenditure? Do we reduce money that we borrow domestically first? Or do we reduce the rates first? So that's the issues that we need balance. So I'll have a meeting with the Central Bank and Kenya Bankers Association to address this matter. If I am confirmed. Yes. Mr. Speaker, on internal audit, I can't agree more. Again, we must use our internal audit to improve efficiency in financial management. And internal audit is resident at the Treasury. This issue of corruption at the UN, I saw it on some email that was sent to me. And the allegation was that I used...
With the same person?
I suspect. Yeah. That while working at the University of Nairobi, that I used the university funds to campaign. Probably the person who has sent that message is not alive to the fact that I left university and went elsewhere, worked for 3.5 years before I became a member of parliament.
You said so.
Yeah. So I left university in 2004. And actually, I resigned and got my pension back. It was 218,000. If I stole their money, they would have not paid me my pension. I think that's, to me, someone who probably is wondering how I made it to Parliament. And I didn't have, I didn't
Your
have
competitors,
money.
Just go on.
Yeah, but I want to tell him that I was that I was the least endowed in 2007. Actually, they used to make a joke that I was campaigning with a bicycle and made it to Parliament because of trust that the people had in me. Late capitation to schools, this is all about availability of revenue. We must make money available and pay capitation, pay pension, pay CDF. Remember, we have rolled over 13 billion from last year's NGCDF. I personally, Mr. Speaker, am a proponent of National Government Constituency Development Fund. I support it fully because this is money that has revolutionized education in rural areas. You go to my constituency, the constituency I've represented for 15 years. Before CDF, we didn't even have primary schools. They were there by name, but there were no classrooms. Right now, you can see what it has done, and many others. Contracting, making public the contracts, that I started by saying we must be transparent and communicate what we do as a country. Housing levy, I don't want to really talk a lot about this housing levy because I still need to understand how it is operationalized, where the money is resident, and all the challenges around it we must deal with because it is my duty if I'm confirmed. It is my duty to make sure that this money is properly accounted for. Promoting informal sector, I think I talked about that.
Yes,
In terms of wage bill contributed to by the Constitution, that is true. Mr. Speaker, this Constitution is too expensive. I know the counties had been given, but Mr. Speaker, truth be told, we should have had these counties as agents of devolution for development, but not government. We should have had bigger governments. Where you have now, you go to Vihiga, Mr. Speaker, it's a county with governor, deputy governor, you have CCs, 10 of them, you have county assembly, you go to Busia,
chief officers,
it's the same, chief officer, all that. You go to
sub-county administrators,
yeah, and you
ward
see,
administrators, village administrators.
You name it.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, there is even a clamor, very outrageous, for more counties. My Suba community want a county. I'm even asking, is it viable?
Mary wants a county.
Mary is calling for the Teso county. Let us face it. If we could have a system where we have regional governments, and then now devolve resources you can devolve as much as you want. Look, we have devolved CDF with a fund manager there with a very few skeleton staff, and it is working. We could do the same with the devolving resources. That is what Kenyans wanted. But these big governments with big cars, with flags all over the place, I think we overstretched ourselves. But that is upon Kenyans to decide. It is not John Mbadi, either as a cabinet secretary or even a member of parliament, to decide for Kenyans. Kenyans will make that decision.
Thank you, John. I'll ask you two questions. One, we were told by one of your colleague nominees that in the road sector alone, we have pending bills of 166 billion.
Yes.
Out of which 92 is actual debt or bills, and the rest is interest and penalties.
Yeah.
Now, in the event you get this position you are looking for, would you take time to negotiate with the people you owed the money to compromise on interest and penalties so that you reduce the weight on the exchequer? Number two, the PFM Act is very clear, and we passed it in this parliament, that no procuring agent can procure goods and services unless there's an attendant budget and funds. How are you going to ensure that this is enforced so that we don't run into these problems of pending bills? Because if you have an attendant budget, you procure goods and services, on delivery or completion, you pay. What are you going to do?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to agree that we will have to negotiate the interests and penalties that have been charged on various contracts. I am aware of that bill by the ministry. That is actually State Department for Roads. If you go to our records in Parliament, Public Accounts Committee had requested the Ministry of Roads to provide information on pending bills, analyzed, categorized in terms of principal sum, interest, and penalties. And we have that information in Parliament. I'm sure my colleagues will submit a report to the effect. We actually were recommending that the government negotiates with these contractors on the interest and penalties. But that you can only do if you show willingness and you show intention to pay. So I will work with the Cabinet Secretary for Roads and Infrastructure to make sure that we clearly demonstrate an intention to settle these bills. Road construction has stalled across the country as a result of this. And I will tell you, my constituency, where I come from, is one of them, as one project which has just stalled because of this. So we need to do this across the country so that the road construction resumes. Because we have already invested money in these roads. We can't continue keeping them. But we have constraints. look at the budget of roads ministry. In fact, I was saying that that budget at the rate of 50 billion, the pending bills alone, you may require not less than 3-4 years. But then if you have to finance all committed.
Churchill told us committed road projects.
That's actually where I was heading.
Are 1 trillion.
Yes. If you have to commit to, for all commitments, you need 20 years. Committed roads, that is roads that have been started, their value, if you sum all of them across the country. So it's terrible. There are some initiatives which I think we should promote, where we get some of this road infrastructure done through PPPs. But there is also an initiative to negotiate, if the terms would be favorable, with some of the contractors that are coming from specific countries to take up this if it is within our budget ceiling, loan ceiling or debt ceiling, to take them up. Like the Chinese government has so many contractors around here who are doing roads using GOK funds. Currently, there are very few road projects done by loans from China. They are all working on roads funded by GOK funds. So we need to explore that. Finally, on procurement without budget, Mr. Speaker, this is again another problem. And the problem is not entirely that there is no budget. The budget is not there, but there is no money. The exchequer releases come late. Why? Because we are not able to collect. We don't have money. So we must just cut our clothes according to our sizes. That is the starting point. The planning we must have, and someone asked about the planning in one single portal. There is a disconnect between planning and budgeting. We need to synchronize. And this is the same ministry. We must ensure that we link planning to budgeting, to cash management, so that we don't commit ourselves into purchasing or contracting when we don't have the capacity to pay.
We have grossly overshot the time. There are some people watching from US who have sent these 2 questions. What is your view on the potential of blockchain technology within the financial sector, particularly in light of the blockchain technology report to 2020? Would you support the adoption of this technology? The next one, in light of the increasing global uncertainties and economic volatility, gold reserves have become more crucial in safeguarding national wealth and ensuring economic stability. Elaborate on how you would propose leveraging gold reserves as a reliable store of value in the current and future economic landscape. Additionally, would you explain any strategic measures that can be considered to enhance the role of gold in Kenya's financial system? Take at maximum 2 minutes. These are Kenyans watching these proceedings from the US. Pardon?
The first one of the blockchain, Mr. Speaker, I must admit that I need to understand it better. And
that is an honest answer. We understand.
We need to get what it is. If it is something that
don't
can
also
help
know it.
the country,
I also don't know it.
The better. On leveraging on gold reserves.
We'll need somebody to teach us about it.
Do we have an ICT person around? But don't you worry, Mr. Speaker. Now that has been brought.
There's a nexus between finance and ICT.
We will.
CBK, maybe when you get, if you get approved, CBK should be able to sort you.
Yes. Okay.
That's why I was saying that don't you worry, I will get...
On the gold reserves, just say yes or no.
Yeah, gold reserves, that actually we need as a country to move towards even establishing sovereign wealth funds, and gold reserves can help us in that. Yes. And those are areas, those are emerging areas that we need to look at. Thank you.
Thank you. Lastly, John Mbadi, as a nominee, I have some few mundane questions for you. Have you ever been adversely mentioned in any integrity-related report or investigations?
No.
Do you hold any leadership position in any political party within Kenya?
No, at the moment.
You said you resigned.
Yes.
Can you tell us your net worth?
My net worth, Mr. Speaker, is 380 million. And Mr. Speaker, my net worth, the difference between, I saw some of my colleagues have done their calculation differently, but my understanding of net worth is it's assets less liabilities.
Liability, yes.
So if you take all the assets that I have, and I wish I had my file here.
I've seen your calculation.
Yeah, it's 308.
You have 437.
Yeah, 437
less 57
assets.
million liabilities.
Yes.
You are 380.
Yeah, and the liabilities is mortgage within Parliamentary Service Commission. SACCO loans, about 31, about 20 million or about. And finally, there is the KCB Bank loan of about 12 million. Yeah.
We received 43. We received 34.
The only deferred income, Honorable, sorry, Honorable, the only deferred income I have is I have some I have two now, but the one for Parliament, I don't know. The pension, I don't know how much it will be, so I didn't
calculate. It will be calculated.
But there's one which I have with ICA of about 6 million.
Your pensionable now it will be calculated.
Yeah.
It will be just below 200.
Thank you.
Chair, I was mentioning that because of the challenges Kenyans have had with this matter, because like now his deferred income next year would constitute part of his net worth, or rather when it matures.
Yes.
And most likely, if he's approved or if he goes through another vetting, Kenyans will want to know
how did your wealth grow?
How did your wealth grow?
I will be able to explain that, Mr. Speaker.
So, nominee John Mbadi, we received 34 memoranda against or about you, some saying it was right to be nominated, others not. And there are 3 particularly that just involve around, I think, parochial conflicts within your political setup, but you have answered all of them. So we will be, there's some things that clearly look parochial, how you quarreled with people in political meetings and so on. So we've also looked at your documents and cross-checked with what we have, and we found them correct. So unless you are lawfully held, you are released to go to your other duties.
Thank you.
Today is your Sabato.
Yes.
So you can go to church.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I requested for my date to be changed, but the only time which was available was still Sabato.
Yes.
Because it was 7 p.m. yesterday.
Yes.
And according to my faith, from 6 p.m. or thereabout, already Sabato imeingia. So, but I treated this as kama, is it donkey ama ng'ombe imeanguka kwa shimo?
Yes, lazima utoe.
Yeah, but thank you, Mr. Chairman, together with the members of Parliament, members of the committee, for giving me this opportunity to appear before you and present my case. I have done my best. Thank you.
Thank you. Sergeant, you can escort the nominee. Thank you. Pardon, we'll give you 5 minutes. And let me also say this. Of course, this was a candidate of immense interest, given the importance of the docket. There will be others with less immense interest. So we'll recover the time we have overshot with the next or the other. Yes.
hata kama atainua mkono lakini
Easy questions.
Sasa 1 2 1 2 unasikia? One two. Okay. Let me check the cable. So. Masi. Ama sikusikia kitu Masi?
No, Irene.
Okay, nimesikia vitu zangu tu. Irene.
Good evening, Mr. Speaker. Good evening, Mr. Speaker. Tunajicho
Yes, yes. It's a job exposure.
Actually, this guy, this guy.
Nani anafuata?
He follows actions. Yes, safe. I think it's very good.
Very. Pandisha juu kidogo. Commercial.
Honorable members, we have quorum. Welcome back. Our next nominee is one Salim Mvuria Mugala. Sergeant, you may bring the nominee. Take your seat. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
You are Salim Mvuria Mugala, EGH.
Yes.
Welcome to this Committee on Appointments to interact with us so that you can be assessed by this Committee of National Assembly on your suitability to hold the office to which you have been nominated by His Excellency the President. We'll start by administering an oath. You may choose to use the Bible, the Quran. I think there's also an Indian holy book.
The Quran.
The Gita. Yes, the Quran, so you may be upstanding. Take the Quran in your right hand and recite the oath that the sergeant will show you.
I, Salim Mvuria Mgala Mvuria, do swear that the evidence I shall give before this committee on the matter under this consideration shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me Allah.
The next is if you have your documents, pass them on to the clerk to cross-check with what we have on you. We'll start by introducing ourselves. I'm the chairman of this committee, Speaker of the National Assembly. On my right is the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable Gladys Boss. On my left is the Clerk of the National Assembly, Samuel Njoroge. I'll invite the honorable members of the committee to introduce themselves. Naisula.
Naisula Lesuda, MP Samburu West.
Nelson Koech, MP Belgut.
David Kosing, MP Pokot South.
Gikaria David, Nakuru Town East.
Mase Mary, Teso South.
Abdul Rahim Daud, MP North Imenti.
George Gitonga Murugara, Tharaka.
Owen Baya, Kilifi North.
Robert Mbui, Kadiani.
Stephen Mule, Matungulu.
Dido Raso, Saku.
Abdi Shurie, Balabala.
Nishimboko Likoni.
Rehab Mukami.
I'm Caleb Sabot.
For the record,
Kimani Shoma.
for purpose of these proceedings, you'll be referred by everybody as nominee. So nominee, introduce yourselves by name, educational background, work experience, and your key competences that make you believe you are suitable for the appointment to which you have been proposed in under 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker and honorable members of this committee. My name is Salim Mvuria Mgala. I have a master's degree. I also have a bachelor's degree from Egerton University. I also did my KCSE at Mpeketoni Secondary School and primary school at Maveriverini Primary School.
Mpeketoni in Lamu?
Yes, Mpeketoni in Lamu. Mr. Speaker, I come to this vetting session also having served as the first governor of Kwale County, and I also worked different positions in international non-government organizations. I also come to this vetting committee as the immediate former cabinet secretary, mining, blue economy, and maritime affairs. I come to this committee, Mr. Speaker, having served the public for over 10 years. Mr. Speaker and members of this committee, I also have leadership, management, and administrative skills that are part of my competencies for this process. I come to this vetting committee also with a formidable track record of performance in different spheres of the public, having transformed the county of Kwale socially, politically, and economically, and also having provided leadership in key reforms in the Ministry of Mining, Blue Economy, and Maritime Affairs. There are quite a number of details, but because of time, I want to present myself before this committee and before Kenyans as a candidate, as a nominee who has the formidable requisite experience to manage the affairs of the Ministry of Investment, Trade, and Industry. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'll invite the Deputy Speaker to ask the first question.
Honorable Mvuria, I will ask you questions, one relating to where you're coming from, so we know how well you performed from your previous Ministry of Mining and Blue Economy, and then to the ministry that you're going to. First, I'll start. I would like you to tell us about the key deliverables that can be attributed to your tenure when you were the CS for Blue Economy, Maritime, and so on. Taking into account some of the issues that are raised, in 2023, there was unexplained deaths of cage farmers in Lake Victoria. What did you do about that? There was also, when you came into office, there had been a report in 2019, the performance audit report on monitoring of mining operations by the State Department of Mining. And an act of parliament, the Mining Act, had been passed when you came into office. So Kenyans said that, the report said that currently only 1% of our GDP is attributable to mining, yet it should be as high as 10%. And another thing that was raised in that report is that we've had mines that have not been restored, which has become areas of criminal activity. There's also been deaths around unlicensed and properly regulated mines. So how did you work when you joined office to enhance the sector's oversight, improve licensing conditions, and to ensure that we have responsible mining practices? On where you're going, I'm reliably informed that the Ministry of Trade, where you're going, also has a Kenya Bureau of Standards under it. Tell us what you will do to ensure that you curb the issue of counterfeit products and substandard products and contraband products coming into our country, particularly ethanol, which has caused the big challenge of illicit brew, because people are smuggling the ethanol through Uganda and Tanzania, because I think the duty in Kenya is much higher. And lastly, also the banned pesticides that are banned and have been confirmed to cause cancer, that are coming through our borders and are being cleared by KEBS. Thank you.
Nominee, you can answer those.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair and Honorable Gladys, for the questions that you put before me. First of all, when I reported and assumed office at the Ministry of Mining, Blue Economy, and Maritime Affairs, this was a very new ministry. The three topics have been there before: mining, fisheries, blue economy, but in terms of having it as a ministry, that was the first time. So I did provide leadership in carrying out key reforms to ensure that that ministry can achieve the mandate and also can make a contribution in the economy of our country. And the first reform that we carried out was the reform around licensing. Before the reforms, licensing was very haphazard, and therefore what has happened now is that we have now an organized licensing system where investors apply through the online cadastre, and then we have structures that review and recommend licensing. And even as I left office, the process of licensing is up to date, and it is now working according to procedure. As a result of that, the moratorium was lifted in October last year, and licenses over 1,200 are now getting processed without any challenges. The second thing that is key for reforms is the testing and sampling. Investors had a lot of challenges, on testing their products, and therefore I led reforms that have now devolved 8 labs across the country. So now we have decentralization, and investors can easily now do their testing across the country. There's one more that is still under reform, the Mbadi House, which I also had committed to the committee at that time, and it is also in good progress. I also provided leadership in instituting reforms on value addition, and as we speak, we have quite a number of investors across the country that are doing value addition, because exporting of raw minerals denies the country a lot of revenue and jobs. If you go to the Western region, for example, we have an investor in gold refinery, 5.8 billion. In Elgeyo Marakwet, you have Flospa. We have an investor, 4.8 billion. In Vihiga, we have an investor, 2.5 billion. And we had also mapped other areas of the country. Right now, there's an investor who is ready to do 11 billion of iron ore in Taita Taveta. That will also benefit Tharaka in an area called Kithiori and part of Kitui. So that bringing on board of investors is part of my achievement in the ministry. And we also organized the artisanal mining individuals into cooperative societies. Now we have about 300 cooperative societies that are ready for licensing across the country. I provided leadership in gazetting 29 artisanal mining committees that will be giving permits on the ground so that people do not have to travel away from where they are. We took the issue of illegal mining very seriously and safety, and proposed measures to have a mining police unit that is responsible for some of the issues. So I take note of the issues you have raised about the insecurity in some of the mines. So the mining police unit has been very critical in making sure that they work with the county security teams to ensure that some of these issues are being addressed on the ground. In terms of mine restoration, each of the applicant for a mining license, they have to attach an environmental restoration plan, which they do as they report, and they also do as they exit. And we have compliance teams to ensure that this can be observed. The other thing is that mining was understaffed, and we have quite a number of staff now who have come on the ground, and things are moving on. On blue economy, many people, many Kenyans had not understood the blue economy and fishery sector, and we instituted reforms also to ensure that we can inspire the economy of the country through blue economy. As a result, we provided a mapping in the Indian Ocean and Lake Victoria so that we can allow for lower level value addition units and infrastructure that are going to help fishermen and other stakeholders in the sector. So as a result, we did mapping from all the way Lamu to Kwale, and also from Busia to Migori, and identified areas for basic value addition. As I speak, these value addition points have now been contracted, and they will be helping fishermen to delay sales so that they can fetch good price. On that note, we also provided leadership in ensuring that we reform the beach management units into cooperative societies. Right now, we have around 240 cooperative societies in the fishery sector that are going to be very useful, to engage with the economy in terms of capacity building, but also in terms of engaging and being linked to financial institutions. So right now, the government is now ready to invest 1.4 billion in the coast region for the landing sites, and the government is also ready to invest another 1.5 billion in the Lake region, all the way from Mulukoba to Got Kochola in Migori, where those structures have been identified. Since independence, this country has not had an industrial vessel. We licensed the first one, which is going to be providing, avenue for industrial fishing and provide 4 billion every year in terms of income in the Indian Ocean. Our target was to do 3 before the end of the year, but last 2 weeks we gave license to 1 vessel, and more are coming to ensure that we are able to inspire the potential in the blue economy sector. So, Mr. Speaker, this topic is very lucrative, but I also want to add that Kenya is now a highly respected maritime country, because when we went to London last year and the campaign, Kenya was elected category C as a maritime country. And as a result of that profile, I continue to provide leadership to ensure that we are able to upgrade our institutions to fit the new profile. As a result of that, we have a pending draft bill for Bandari Maritime Academy to be a full institution. And part of the upgrade is to construct a survival and training center, which will cost the government of Kenya 2.4 billion, basically to ensure that we enhance our capacity building on maritime affairs.
Okay, I think, Honorable Mburi, I think I'm satisfied now, but I think it confirms what the President said, that you had very poor communication, because you've done great things, but no Kenyan knows about it. I am from the Flospa area. I didn't even know that you have an investor for it. So maybe you can use an opportunity to tell my people in Elgeyo Marakwet what exactly you're doing with Flospa before you go to your next answer.
Thank you very much, Honorable Gladys. And I think maybe we missed out, but the members of parliament from that region and the leadership, we were together when we were introducing the investor. But because of this session, I'm sure now we have created awareness across the board to tell everybody that now we have an investor in Elgeyo.
Before we go to the next, Salim, the licensed industrial vessel in our ocean waters, is it Kenyans or foreigners?
It is a foreign-owned, but also we will have Kenyans who also partner in that vessel.
What percent local content?
The local content, okay, we haven't signed the agreement yet. I think that was part of the negotiation, but we are looking at between 15 to 30% Kenyan.
The law provides 40.
That was the initial negotiation, and the negotiations have not been closed, so I'm sure
anyway, now
my colleagues will take over and move.
We'll ask whoever will be taking over.
Exactly.
Majority Leader?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker.
Remember, strictly one question each.
Honorable Speaker, CS nominee, EAC, the East African Trade Community, trade negotiations. Kenya is viewed as a very weak negotiator, especially for her local protection of her local industries and local farmers. And I would want to hear what you intend to do, should you be confirmed in this ministry, to be a good negotiator for Kenyan industries and more so farmers. Yesterday, the Honorable Mule here, or the day before, was speaking about tomato farmers, onion farmers, potato farmers, egg farmers, poultry keepers in the country not being able to sell their produce locally because of the proliferation of cheaper products coming from the East African community countries. And largely because of the East African Treaty, we cannot use tariff barriers, but the tariff barriers, which are supposed to be negotiated by the ministry. I'm told we've been very weak on that. What would you do to do that? And also on the policy of import substitution. We had very many good proposals, and I agree with the Deputy Speaker that you clearly failed in communication, because all the good things you've spoken about in your ministry of former Ministry of Mining, as you say, you engage with the Elgeyo Marakwet leadership. The Deputy Speaker was born there, but she represents the people of Singishu. Next door, she didn't know, because you engage with the local leadership. But that is an investment for Kenya, not for Elgeyo Marakwet County. And therefore, I want to put it to you, and you will tell us whether you actually did fail in communication. And if you failed in your previous ministry in communication, what would you say to convince Kenyans and us that you will not fail in communicating what you are doing for our country in the new ministry should you be approved? And I'm saying that, moving on to what I was speaking about, import substitution, our local manufacturing sector, because of a failure of communication in government, our local manufacturers had very good propositions or provisions in the finance bill that was lost, as we have been told, out of poor communication by government. We have now exposed our local manufacturers, whether they are manufacturers of diapers, sanitary towels, or those in the steel industry, to unfair competition from very cheap imports whose standards we can't even ascertain since they come to the country, done on standards from other countries, especially those from the far Asian countries. What will you do as a new minister to ensure that we at least save the good provisions that were there in the finance bill, touching on local manufacturing industry, to protect our manufacturing industry now, as since the State Department for Industry will be under you. And some of those provisions sought to protect that State Department work in the manufacturing sector.
Nominee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I want to address the matters that have been raised by the Honorable Majority Leader, and thank you very much, Majority Leader. I think first of all, I want to begin on where you stopped. On the issue of communication, I must say that we did all the best to communicate this through the media and through any other forms. However, going forward, it is a matter that we will be able to strengthen to ensure that there is communication. And communication here...
there is the mainstream media,
yes,
which we used to call mainstream media, which is the TV stations and the newspapers. But today, the alternative media, which is social media, is now the mainstream media.
Yes, exactly.
So you've got to change your thinking, who's alternative and who's the mainstream.
Yeah, that is one of the areas that we will, going forward, I think as government, we will be able to use those channels of communication to ensure that we get everybody on board. On the matter of local manufacturing and the industry in general, that Honorable Member alluded to the fact that there were good things in the finance bill, which were meant to revamp, some of the local manufacturers. One of the key areas that we will strengthen, or I will provide leadership in strengthening, is to make sure that we bring as many stakeholders as possible. For example, the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, KEPSA, the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and many other stakeholders, to make sure that as much as possible they participate. And also using some of the corporations and sagas in the ministry.
Chair, on a point of order, maybe the nominee did not get my question right, because those are the processes you are describing.
Yeah.
I was asking, should you get nominated?
Yes.
And you find, for instance, the provision to levy excise duty on sanitary pads that are fully finished products from, for instance, China, was in an endeavor to actualize the import substitution policy to support local manufacturers. That particular provision was lost in the finance bill. Should you be approved, will you pursue, and maybe the nominee who was there before you actually did put it very well, that it is possible to break down the finance bill into various other laws. Should you then be approved, would you pursue actualizing the good provisions that sought to protect local industry? Because, as I said, they were lost because of the poor communication generally in government. So my direct question is, are you going to pursue the import substitution policy and protection of local industry, should you be approved, and bring legislative proposals to Parliament to actualize that which was lost?
Oh, yes.
Nominee.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I think the answer is yes. Because, you see, if we had very good proposals that inspire the economy and they were lost, what I'm committing to this committee is that we will, and I will provide leadership in the ministry to pursue them. Because if we are to inspire the local manufacturing, then as government we need to have a deliberate policy to ensure that either we impose levies or we reduce levies to ensure that these manufacturing industries can survive. So the answer is yes. I will be providing leadership in pursuing these good things. But as we pursue these good things that were lost in the finance bill, Mr. Chairman, I also want to insist that we'll have a robust engagement with stakeholders who may not have seen this before, so that the decision that is finally made is made with all stakeholders in mind. So that is a commitment and a yes, and we will use all manner of communication to ensure that we are able to paint, the positive gains of this